I'm going to introduce you to Shawnee. Shawnee is a published author, certified yoga therapist, and educational behavioral specialist. Shawnee is also the founder of Asanas for Autism and Special Needs, as well as the founder and director of Yoga Therapy for Youth. She leads trainings globally to teach strategies for supporting children of diverse needs with self-regulation, self-empowerment, and building resilience. Shawnee is the author of Asanas for Autism and Special Needs. She's also just a wonderful overall human. So we are currently very delighted to hand the stage over to her for the theme of stress.
Hi, everyone. So nice to see all of you. And I just feel so honored that I've been asked and given the opportunity to share with you. And I was just going to basically talk a little bit about stress and the impact that stress has on our brains and our bodies, and then thought we could do a few practices, some simple practices to help support us with managing our stress in our daily lives. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the autonomic nervous system and get a better understanding of how stress can really impact the way in which we behave, the way in which we interact with other people, and can so significantly impact just how we navigate the world. So we have what we call the autonomic nervous system, which is basically a network of nerves that communicate with our brain, from our brain to our body and our body to our brain. We have this amazing nerve called the vagus nerve, which I'm very fascinated by. And it essentially runs from our brainstem down into our gut. And it is this like super highway of communication that communicates the sensations that we're feeling in our body to our brain, and also communicates kind of from our thoughts and our thinking to body. So we know that our body can be impacted by thoughts and the way that we think and the anxiety that we feel, but it's also understanding that stress is a physiological experience. It's not just our thinking or our thoughts that cause stress. It can be this combination of reaction in our body, which can create stressful thoughts, and also stressful thoughts that can create reaction in our body. So it's intermingling together at all times. So we have the autonomic nervous system, and the reason why it's called the autonomic nervous system is because it's automatic. We are able to breathe, our heart is pumping without our mind having to tell it to do so, which is, really fascinating and amazing. And essentially what it's built for is to help us survive. It's built for survival, right? So we're here on this planet and we want to stay alive, right? And our brain is designed to help keep us alive. And what happens with stress is that stress is actually a good thing. Stress kind of gets a bad name. It's like the evil stepbrother or stepsister, right? But stress is really designed to help mobilize us. It's designed to help prepare us for challenges. Let's say we have a test that we have to prepare for, or let's say that I'm speaking in front of 159 people on Zoom, and I have to have the energy and the mobilization to be able to just step out there and do it, right? So it gives us a lot of that motivation. It supports us with creativity. The system is designed to actually be supportive to us. When the challenge arises is when we have unmanaged stress. It's when we have perpetual stress that is occurring in our daily lives and we're really not managing it in an effective way. And give a hand raise if any of you have been experiencing stress in the past several months. Yeah, just right? So we know this is a really stressful time in our lives and in the world. And not only do we experience stress in our own internal experience in our own environment, but we can also absorb the stress around us, especially if we're empathic people or we're people that absorb the energy of other people. We can tend to also absorb the stress that's in the surrounding world. And we know globally we have a lot of stress right now. So the autonomic nervous system basically helps to keep our body functioning. It's connected to our respiration, to our heart rate, to perspiration, to our digestive systems, right? So it's kind of keeping all of those things flowing and going. And there's this interaction of the parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and digest, and the sympathetic nervous system, which is more of the activated, mobilized system, right? So they're constantly communicating with each other to keep us in a state of engagement, in a state of alertness. So I just want to name that sympathetic nervous system is our friend, and we want to befriend the sympathetic nervous system. When we get into trouble is when that sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight, flight response. So we have our fight, flight, or freeze response. When we're in our fight flight response, what happens physiologically in our body is all of the blood flow that typically goes to helping support our digestion, pumping the blood flow to our heart, to providing that blood to our brain so that we can be creative, we can function, we can think clearly, is all that blood flow goes to the external limbs to prepare us to fight or to flee. That's our survival response, right? It's like the tiger is chasing us. We're either going to flee from that tiger or we're going to try to fight that tiger. And what's happened in the modern day world, because we don't really live in a very natural environment in our lives, is that we are perceiving that a tiger is chasing us at all times, right? So that tiger is any kind of perceived threat. And what is a perceived threat to me could be a completely different perceived threat to someone else, right? So someone could respond in a stressed way to an experience because they may have a back history, or there just might be some type of trigger that comes from that. But essentially, when we continue to have this perception of danger, and what that is neuroception, right? So it's different than just perception. Perception often is just the thinking brain and how we perceive things. Neuroception is how our nervous system perceives danger, right? So it's more of a physiological, unconscious response. We can't even use our brain to talk us into thinking that everything is okay. It's our nervous system that is actually responding. So it's this perceived threat. It's this perceived tiger, right? And when we are continually experiencing that stress and that tension in the body, and all that blood flow is moving to the external limbs, and it's like we have all this energy happening, we have cortisol pumping through our body. This can really impact our physical well-being. It can impact our digestion. It can impact our heart, our respiration, our entire system, right? And oftentimes it can really impact our immune system. We know it's important for us to keep our immune system strong right now, right? So the management of stress is a huge component. So we essentially want to develop skills to learn how to manage stress, right? Because stress can make us sick, and there's so much research out there now that attributes stress to illness, and attributes stress not only to physical illness, but also to mental illness, to addiction, to many other challenges in our mental functioning. So it affects us on a physiological and on an emotional and thinking level as well. When our body is experiencing stress, when we have this physiological response, that's that highway, that network of communication that goes to our brain and then tells our brain we're in danger. And that's when we begin to experience those anxious thoughts, right? We start to look at the world as a dangerous place. So we might interact with other people in a way where we feel a sense of being threatened by them, right? So think about a time you felt really stressed. And then think about whether or not you were able to effectively communicate and interact with others, right? It can really impact the way that we connect with and interact with the world. So we have that sympathetic, that fight flight. And then we also have the freeze response, which is a parasympathetic response, but it's a deeper level of a parasympathetic response. And that's when we go into shutdown or immobilization. You kind of think of a lizard when, you know, you're walking along the trail and a lizard is scurrying by, and then it might freeze and just completely stop. And what it's doing is it's playing dead, right? It's acting as if it's not alive. And they do that. That happens in the animal world. And essentially what happens is their heart rate slows, their breathing slows, all the systems in the body start to slow. So when we go into freeze, that also impacts our nervous system, right? So we can be in activation where we're ready to fight or flee, or we can go into complete shutdown. And both of those responses can really impact us significantly on a physical, emotional, and mental level. So what do we do about that? What do we do about managing stress, right? And Alex's wonderful practice, that was a great beginning. Just being able to get into our bodies and connect with our bodies, allow ourselves some time to find some movement and some mobilization. But I want to give you a few strategies to just kind of help us, help you find little bits and pieces of ways that you can help to manage your stress in your daily life. The first one is resourcing. So thinking about what are some resources that you have in your life. You know, does it feel relaxing for you to be out in the garden? Is it helpful for you to take a walk? Do you enjoy the time that you sit down and you have tea or coffee? It's not so much about, it's about how it feels for you. It's going to be different for everyone, right? Does it help you take a deep breath when you go out in nature and you look at the green of a tree, right? Is there a person that's a resource to you that when you call them, it just helps to kind of mellow out that activation in your nervous system, right? So those are a few, that's one thing, is resourcing, thinking about what is a resource for you, what is something that helps you to kind of just come back to yourself, take a pause, and feel most like yourself. And that's essentially what we want to feel when we're in homeostasis, when we have that, we're in that parasympathetic state. And it's actually, like I said, a combination of sympathetic and parasympathetic that's happening. It's like this little dance that's happening with both of these parts of the nervous system. Yes, I just saw that someone said music, dancing, right? So a great way to mobilize some of that energy. So if you think about mobilization and immobilization, and you think about all of this blood pumping to your external limbs, what is a way that you can mobilize, but something that you can do to mobilize that energy? So for some people, just sitting still and closing your eyes actually is more activating, especially if you have this high level of activation that's way up here, right? So the type of meditation practice I enjoy, there's actually some movement involved in it. I might do meditation practices that involve walking or going out and having movement with my meditation. I do seated meditation as well, but there's often a practice of allowing my body to move in the way that which I want it to move. So what are some ways that you can help mobilize that energy? Dance and music is a wonderful way to get our system back on track and get back to that place of homeostasis. And it's called our social engagement system. So when we're in that place of feeling a felt sense of safety, of feeling a sense of connection, we're in that social engagement system where our brain is more focused. The actual vagus nerve is connected to the nerves in our face and in our throat and in our ears. So our neuroreception changes when we actually feel a felt sense of safety and connection, right? So you can notice when someone's face is really angry or flat or tense, right? That's not going to help people feel a sense of connection with us, as opposed to when we have like nice relaxed muscles in our face, we feel socially engaged and connected, right? So singing is a wonderful way to, it's called tone the vagal nerve. Dancing is a wonderful way to tone the vagus nerve. Also, the practice of yoga, there's a lot of practices where we are getting, it's mostly about the breathing, where the breathing, when we're breathing, that respiration is helping to tone the vagus nerve as well. So some of those movement practices can be really wonderful in helping us to mobilize. And it doesn't have to be anything yoga related if that's not something you're connected to. It could be going for a bike ride. It could be going for a walk. It could be anything that helps just mobilize some of that energy, right? Also, orienting. So I want to just invite you to do this little practice of orienting with me. And orienting can be done, it's not just, orienting can be done with the eyes. Orienting can be done with the ears. It can be done with the body, with touch. So essentially what it is tapping into our five senses. It's tapping into that connection to our five senses, Because when we tap into our senses, it helps us be in more of a place of presence. So if you think about anxiety, anxiety is like in the past or in the future, right? It's thinking about all the anxious thoughts about what happened, and the anxious mind is spinning on that, or it's about what's going to happen in the future and feeling a sense of anxiety around that. So I'm going to invite you to just do a short little a practice with me, if you don't mind. And you're welcome to opt out if it's not something that you feel comfortable with. So first, I just want to invite you, wherever you're seated, to just take a moment to kind of, orient your body, move your body around a little bit, maybe adjust, stand up, sit down, kind of feel into your body of what feels comfortable for you in your seat. If you want to stand, you may feel like you want to stand up, like your body is saying, I need to stand, I've been sitting, I want to stand up. So much about this practice is about self-empowerment and really tuning into what your body needs, what your nervous system needs, and just doing a little check-in and saying, what does my body need in this moment, right? So if there's any movement that you want to have happen right now, just allow that to happen. And then I'm just going to invite you to bring awareness to your feet. Maybe wiggle your toes, give them a little wiggle, maybe move your feet around, lift your heels up, bring them back down. If you want to take your shoes off and be barefoot, that feels nice to you, you could do that. So we're just going to connect with our feet, connect and ground down, and just feel that contact, and just notice how that contact feels for you. Just take a moment to just notice. Now bring your awareness to your seat or to whatever your body has in contact with it, where you're seated, and just notice for a moment, feel the support of your seat. Maybe notice how it feels to have that connection of your buttocks on the seat or your back body on something. And if you have a cushion or a pillow near or something with some weight, maybe take that, place it on your lap, and just notice that that little extra bit of weight might help you to feel more of a sense of connection or feeling more grounded. So sometimes using weight, like a weighted pillow, a weighted blanket, something on your lap, can actually help bring us back into our body. Anxiety often can pull us out of our bodies and pull us into our minds and sort of out into the outer world, rather than being more internally connected to our internal sensations. So just taking a moment, feeling the feet, feeling the contact with the seat. Let your hands be placed in whatever position feels comfortable for you. And then I invite you to keep your eyes open or allow your eyes to close. I do want to say that if when you close your eyes, you tend to sort of dissociate, that I would suggest that you keep your eyes open for a moment. And just feel into the body. Notice your body, notice any sensations that you can connect with. So much about these practices of stress management is about building capacity. Building capacity in our nervous system is to be able to manage stress. So notice if you feel any sensations in your belly or any sensations in the chest or sensations in any other area of the body where you might feel tension, and we're just exploring without judgment. And then just open your eyes slowly if your eyes are closed. I'm going to talk a little bit about the window of tolerance, and then we're going to go into another orienting practice. So our nervous system, essentially what we all have is this window of tolerance. It's like this capacity in between my hands here, right? And up at the top here is the sympathetic, and down at the bottom this is the fight flight up here, and this is the freeze down below. And you're in between. This is our window of tolerance. The in-between part is the part where we are socially connected, socially engaged. We're in that more parasympathetic rest and digest, right? This is where we want to be optimally most of the time. In this space here, we're moving up from sympathetic and back down to parasympathetic, and we're kind of moving in this little flow. That's what's happening in our nervous system all the time, right? So we're relaxed, we're calm, then we have to mobilize to prepare for our test. We go up into our sympathetic a little bit, then we come back into homeostasis, we come back to that parasympathetic response, right? Now, our window of tolerance can be very narrow based on our level of stress, or it can be a little wider. And essentially what resilience is, what building capacity means, is that if we're here, we start to stretch that window of tolerance a little bit. So think about when you have a lot of stress in your life, you're super stressed, and then it's like that breaking point thing happens that makes you feel like you want to have a nervous breakdown. Anybody raise your hand there if you felt any of that in the past couple of months? That might be something that you would experience, right? So what we want to do is build capacity. We want to build capacity in our nervous system and build that resiliency, which we all innately as human beings have in our systems, right? Some of us, it may be a bit more challenging, especially if we've had maybe a significant amount of trauma that we've experienced in our life. Our capacity might be much smaller, but we have the ability to make that window of tolerance expand, right? So we're going to do another practice, which is orienting with the eyes, right? So just take a moment to look around the room. So feel the contact with your feet again, and then move your eyes around the room. Look around your space like you're looking at it for the first time, that you haven't looked at it before. And just notice the colors, notice the textures, notice anything that your eye wants to gaze on. And we're not really trying to make sense or meaning of anything. It's more that we're just connecting to our space. You can even turn your head back and look behind you and just kind of notice what's in your environment, and notice you're here in this moment in your space, right? That helps to let our nervous system know that I'm not in the past, I'm not in the future, I'm in the present. And that can help build capacity when we can be more connected to the present. And now you might take a moment to notice if there's anything in your environment that has any kind of tactile, positive experience for you. If you have something fuzzy or something even that has weight that you could place in your hand, or that's smooth. So just notice if there's anything that might have a tactile experience that would feel, yeah, I like that, a little stone, right? Ramel, I see. I hope I pronounced your name right. So, oh, a plant. I see Kayla has a plant. So I'm just looking at some of the things. Oh, little fuzzy ball Holly has. So just noticing, oh, puppy. Okay, I don't know if that's Amy there with the puppy, if that's her name, says Am Frank, but yeah, your dog, right? So a dog is a great co-regulator, right? Raise your hand if you have a dog or a cat or another animal, right? A pig, who knows? There's lots of different animals that we can have, right? But anything that has a texture that can kind of bring you to the present moment. Now that you have that, take a moment to just explore that a little bit. Explore the texture, explore the color. Use your fingers to just kind of feel that connection. Yeah, I see everyone, a lot of people chose some different things, right? So we're all different in what our nervous system needs, what our nervous system desires. So go ahead and place that down and just notice for a moment when you experience that, was there any just softening of the shoulders or a little breath that came, you know, anything that might have sort of brought that activation down just a little bit. And I want to name that it's okay if that didn't happen for you, right? This is something that if we continue to practice it over and over again, it can bring us back into it. It can help build that capacity, but it doesn't always happen right away. So letting go of that judgment of whether or not you did feel that. Now I'm going to invite you to just take a moment. This could be down regulating, or it could be up regulating depending on the environment you're in. If you have a lot of screaming children in your environment, it may not be something that supports, but just take a moment to orient to any sounds in your environment. Notice if you can hear any sounds. And this can be helpful, let's say if you enjoy certain sounds, if you go in nature and you just close your eyes for a moment, let yourself listen to the sounds of nature, or again, orienting to music, right? So music can be really powerful in bringing us into that more regulated state. But it also helps us to tune into our environment, it helps us to tune into the here and now. And essentially, when we do that, that can let our nervous system know, which is in that state of, I'm in danger, right? I'm in imminent danger right now. There's a chasing me. Someone said they hear birds outside. Wonderful. So when we tune in and we do some of these practices, it lets our nervous system know, not the brain, not the mind, the thinking mind, right? Because you can say to your mind, everything is okay, I'm not in danger, everything is fine, I'm not in danger. The nervous system doesn't necessarily believe that. So we do these nervous system practices to let the nervous system know, I'm safe, everything is okay, I'm not in immediate danger right now, right? So it's reminding our nervous system that I'm okay in this moment. We might not always feel that way, especially with the challenges that are going on in our lives and in the world right now. But in this moment, I'm okay, right? So we're letting the body know this through more of a physiological experience. So we did our orienting through our ears, our orienting through our eyes. We did orienting through touch, right? And then we did a practice of grounding, which is connecting with your feet, connecting with your body, maybe putting some weight on your lap or on your body to help you kind of, and I actually have this little lap pillow. It's a little dog weighted lap pillow that I use often if I'm feeling a tremendous sense of anxiety. I've lived with anxiety my whole life since I can remember. It's always been a challenge for me. So, you know, I want to name that this is a practice that I continue to come back to, that I haven't mastered yet. And I don't think any of us ever master these practices. It's just always coming back to the practice, coming back to connecting to our bodies, tuning into our bodies, and just taking a moment to reset and check in, right? We just go through our lives rushing and hurrying, and our mind is going, and oftentimes we just don't take the time to tune in and connect with our bodies. When we can be more embodied and connected to our bodies, we know those subtle signals from our body that are telling us that something's off, right? We're feeling these sensations in our gut, we're feeling this tension in our chest, we're feeling tension in our muscles, and so often we want to ignore those. But if we can tune in, then we can do some of these practices to build that window of tolerance and build our capacity. So when stress comes, we have more capacity. We're not right here where we're just gonna feel like we're gonna break. We have a little more space, a little more window of tolerance there when challenges in our life arise, and they will continue to arise, right? We can't completely eliminate stress from our lives, but we can be in control. We can be self-empowered to do some practices to manage that stress. So I think my time is up. That was good timing there. I love this. I'm so passionate about this topic. So don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any questions, or anything that you want to ask about that. But just a few of those little grounding practices, and then think about your resourcing. Think about what are resources to you, and see if that's something that you can integrate in a practical way, right? Not that you're going to go and run on the treadmill for an hour every day now, but that you're going to take 5 minutes to maybe just stand outside, look at nature. You're going to take, a 3-minute walk around the block. You make it attainable, make it something that's not going to create, a sense of disappointment. But there's so many little pieces that we can do throughout our day to reset. So I suggest just starting with at least once a day, where you do a little grounding and connecting, whatever that might be, resourcing. And then when you start to build that pattern, right? We build this pattern, then you might start to weave more in, and just invite you to notice if you feel any change in your nervous system after you do some of those practices.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shawnee. I know it's hard to clap on these type of things. I know we have the little reactions down at the bottom, but thank you so much for sharing with us. I love what you said. We can't eliminate stress from our life, but we can increase our capacity by opening the window of tolerance. And I think all of us, it's so crazy how even in just a few intentional moments, the weight of stress can start to be released, and we can start to live in kind of our actual reality, which is a really awesome thing. Thank you so much for sharing.
My pleasure.
with that said, so we're going to open it up to questions. I'm sure people have some questions around stress and around the topic. And so what we'd ask for people to do is, if you have a question, down on the bar, you have the ability to raise your hand to ask a question. So if you have a question, please raise your hand. If you don't feel comfortable actually asking your question live in person on Zoom, feel free to add your question to the chat. We'd be happy to answer it that way as well. And so it looks like we have a few people with their hands up, and we can start there. Let's see. Devin, looks like you've got a question. I'm gonna go ahead and unmute you and let you ask your question.
Thanks, Nate. Thank you, Shawnee. This was really wonderful. I've learned these somatic tools from other people, but you just did it in such a clear way. So I really, really appreciate it. My question is, I notice, and this has happened a few times with orienting or different somatic tools, that like at the beginning, it actually activates me more and creates a little bit more stress in the body. And then it kind of will eventually downregulate. I'm just curious if that's a normal process. And right now I'm not fully downregulated. So is it just spending more time doing it or extending it? Is it normal for these things to first create more stress before they dissipate the stress?
Yeah. Hi, Devin. That's a great question. Absolutely. If we're not used to being in our bodies, right? If we don't feel a sense of safety in our bodies, and there can be many reasons around that, right? It can feel a little overwhelming and activating for us to actually tune in. That's why the external orienting can be a better practice to start with, where you're just noticing the external environment, you're tuning into sounds, and you're not quite moving into the body yet. So really starting those practices first, where you're building that awareness and that presence, and you slowly start to move into the body. So too much too fast with coming into the body, if it's not something that you're familiar with or that is activating for you, can actually, not be the best practice for you. So finding that resourcing, maybe mobilizing and just being like, what does my body want to do right now? Does it want to shake? Does it want to do I want to hop around? Do I have all this activation? Remember, we're talking about the blood flow moving to all the external limbs. Do I need to release some of that? And then maybe I can kind of ground down, but we have to meet our nervous systems where they're at, and all of our nervous systems are in a different place. So I suggest the more of external first before you move into the internal, that can be a helpful way to start to transition into more of that embodied practice.
Great question. Thank you. Well, it looks like we have Hannah, who Mike's going to unmute next.
Oh, hi. I think I've actually met your husband, Tim, and he told me about all the work that you do. Sorry, that's my dog.
My husband, my greatest cheerleader.
The work that you do. Yes, he is. Oh my gosh, such a nice guy. And yeah, he told me about the work that you do with children. And do you mind just sharing a little bit about what you do? Because I think it's really fascinating.
Sure, yeah. So I have worked for, it's almost going on 3 decades with children, which is crazy. I started working with children when I was 17. And I work with neurodiverse children of all bodies and abilities. And so I actually lead trainings on teaching yoga and mindfulness to children with diverse needs, and working through a trauma lens. Trauma is a big passion of mine, a lot of trauma when I was a child. And so this path has just brought me in this direction through that experience. So through Asanas for Autism and Special Needs, I lead those trainings. And I also do private sessions with the whole gamut, the whole spectrum of adults, children of all brains, all abilities. I mean, we're really all neurodiverse, and that's really the message I hope we can find in the world, is that there's no normal, quote unquote, and that if we embrace neurodiversity, that our brains are all different, we all navigate the world differently. I think that we would be a much more accepting, happy, loving, beautiful world. And that's my passion and my mission, is to bring these practices and make them accessible and inclusive. So I'm a really big supporter, and I have a big passion for inclusion of all children and adults, no matter their background, their ability, where they come from, anything like that. So thanks for asking that question. And and asking me to share. And I work a lot with the nervous system. The nervous system, I'm a total brain geek and neuroscience geek. And I love everything and all things the nervous system.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Do we have any other questions? If you have a question, please raise your hand and we will call on you. And while we're waiting on a question from the audience, Shawnee, I had a question for you, which was, maybe I'm the only one here in all 127 people still in the Zoom, but I find that when I get stressed and I've maybe lost rhythm with the practices that have kept me like kind of grounded, I almost spin myself up even more into trying to take on a lot of things at the same time to get back into a space where I can do that. Can you share any practices for when we get to those moments where we're like, oh my gosh, my routine's blown, I've totally ruined it. How do I ever get back to normalcy or practice? Talk to us a little bit about what we can do in those seasons.
Okay. Well, first I'm just going to talk about self-compassion. So let's everyone just take our hand over our heart, one hand on our heart, one hand on our belly, and just offer ourselves self-compassion, because that's the start, right? When we go into that cycle of, I'm not doing it right, I didn't do my routine, and we just create all this negative thinking, right? So it's first just maybe, Nate, I would say just take your hand on your belly and your hand on your heart. Take a moment to pause and say, I have compassion for myself, I'm doing the best I can. Right? And so that could be a grounding practice right there, where you just come back to compassion. Mm-hmm. And really these practices, the simpler, the better. You know, we don't have to get super complicated with this crazy routine of all these things that we do. Just notice as you're practicing what feels best in my nervous system, what feels best in my body, and then maybe make yourself a little sticky note, a reminder of that, place it in some different locations, so that, because we're working with the brain and the body, right? The mind is also important for us to be working with as well. So we're letting the mind know, oh yeah, that practice really helped me. And then come to your compassion and take a moment to just do that one practice. And I would say it's more, not so much about routine of the same rigid routine. It's more about tuning into what your body needs in that moment, because it's going to be different in different times. It's not always going to be the same, right? So allowing for that flexibility in there is going to alleviate some of that rigidity and that anxiety around it not being exactly the same as it's supposed to be.
That's super helpful. Thank you for sharing that. And I think self-compassion's definitely a huge one in the season of our world that we're in right now. So I appreciate that. Do we have any other questions, Mike, that have come in for Shawnee?
I think we're good, but if anybody wants to submit questions, you can reach out to her on Instagram. You can hit us up on our Creative Mornings Instagram, and we're happy to connect you all with some more information that the chat cheerleaders have been putting in the chat.
Awesome. Well, with that, let's give a air clap. Thank you again to Shawnee for sharing with us today and for just having such a relevant topic and some relevant practices that we can take as a community. And so, Shawnee, thank you. Thank you so much for your time today. And also wanted to say thanks to Kayla and Alex for also participating in today's event and conversation. And with that, for the first time in the history of our Zoom events, we're actually going to end our Creative Mornings at 10 a.m.